Photographer Mattias Fredriksson is a legend in the snow and bike world. And today we have him dialing in from northern BC to talk about deep pow, epic berms, and more. Hi, I'm Stephen Casimiro from Adventure Journal, and you are, as you know, listening to the AJ podcast. With me is my co-host, Justin Hausman. What's up, Justin?
Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Excellent. And I'm so excited about our guest today, Mattias. Mattias just wrote and shot a piece for Adventure Journal in the 31st edition, and he has another piece coming up later this year. And I'm just so excited to sit down. I have not shared a chair with Mattias or a skin track, but I'm hoping that I will soon. And in the meantime, this will be the best, closest thing. Mattias, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, so excited to have you on. God, you have been in so many amazing places. You've produced so many incredible images, and I can't wait to sort of hear a little bit more about your story. So let's just dive in with giving us, tell us your story. Tell us where you came from, your first time on skis and all that, and we'll take it from there.
So I grew up in Sweden, in the south of Sweden, actually. And, back then, I'm approaching 50 here. So many years ago, it was snow on the ground throughout the winters, even there. So I remember my first memories of skiing is basically just outside the house on the closest to the house on the yard, but then primarily we were skiing on the road down towards the lake, and that felt like a massive ski hill back then. And I remember they were piling up massive snow piles a little bit lower down that road, and that was our start ramp. And then we used like these little sticks that we found in the woods and tried to imitate Ingmar Stenmark and all the other alpine skiers we saw on TV. That was basically my upbringing as a skier. My parents didn't alpine ski like slalom, so we as a family we were cross country skiing. So that's how I grew up. So for the first like 3-4 years, I guess, it was just cross-country equipment, and they were told by other parents that that's how you get your kids started, and it was not until my sister and I, we mastered the cross-country equipment that they were start looking for alpine equipment for us.
I bet that gave you a great base, having that free heel and being little and sliding around, walking around on them.
Totally, and that was exactly what other parents told my parents to like start there, and also when back then when you have to switch equipment every year, it was a way to kind of see if we were interested before you invest in the expensive gear. And I remember we always had these swap weekends, or so like you can go there and find used equipment, and then the next year you went back and left your stuff and switched to something more appropriate in length and so on. So that was a great way to get going in the beginning. And actually we have in my hometown here in Terrace in BC, we have this program. They have these swap weekends every year, and it's such a good way for people to have better access to skiing, because I see that being one of the biggest problems for skiing in these days.
Is skiing as expensive in Sweden as it is in the States? I mean, are lift tickets and stuff like that just outrageously expensive there too?
Not as crazy, but it's getting there. And I would say with the difference in economy, it's pretty much as bad there as in North America.
I'm surprised it's not like subsidized by the government there. I feel like Scandinavian countries should just subsidize everything. I would think like chairlifts would also be a part of that.
It's not really like that anymore. But I mean, when I grew up, like that was the great thing with skiing. Ingmar Stenmark and a few other alpine ski legends, they made this sport becoming a people sport. It was like everybody skied. And when they skied on in the World Cup and on TV, the country stopped. Like I remember, like in school, like they were rolling in these massive TVs, and our classes just completely stopped. The whole school watched it. Every workspace, like the whole country was just coming to a standstill. And then the little ski hills opened up everywhere, like all throughout the whole country, and everybody skied, and that's how it became this very inclusive, amazing sport. And it had been something for just the selected few, but it became that epic family, and yeah, everybody did it, right?
Through the power of Stenmark's fame.
Oh yeah, that, I mean, he was like, he was the most famous person in the country and beyond, and everything he did was just on TV all the time. And he was such a funny character too, like and very quiet, and yeah, he became that person that made skiing everybody's sport.
Was he like a gold medalist?
Yeah, he was a multi-time world champion, and he probably, I don't know, I'd have to think back farther, but I'm guessing he was probably the first global ski star.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, Jean-Claude Kelly and these guys were amazing too, but at that time, I don't think TV had the same impact, and this is like 20, 30 years before social media, right? So like when Stenmark, I think he came up like in the late 70s and 80s, and yeah, I can't think of anyone that was a bigger star globally before that. But that time was really when the medium, TV and radio, was really in everybody's home too, perhaps.
So how did you get from a budding cross-country alpine skier to ski bum? Where did you...
So first of all, I will give a shout out to our neighbor, Staffan. He was a ski instructor at this community-based society. So since my parents didn't alpine ski, he took me on so I can go with him. And he saw directly that I was super keen, and I guess I was pretty good. So I became basically his little sidekick when he was coaching. So I went with him many weekends to little ski hills near where we lived, because there was quite a few. So and he had some used gear, and he really gave me like that extra push. And then I started to go, like, I mean, we went as a family to the Swedish mountains, and then eventually I started to go on my own trips. But it wasn't until like I even stopped skiing for a bit, because I did a bunch of other sports. I was playing tennis and soccer and volleyball and all kinds of things. And then I eventually worked in a sports store in the town where I grew up. And there I kind of, the interest came back and a little bit more for real. So I started to go to bigger mountains, and I was like 17 or something like that. I think I went to the Alps the first time when I was 17, and then and that's kind of when I really started to feel like, okay, this is something I really want to do. And I'd also started to write a bit and photograph a bit, and yeah. And then I picked up the Swedish ski magazine Åka-skidor, and that was like, okay, this is what I want to do.
Does Sweden have, I've only been to like Malmo, maybe like one other city. Does Sweden have like a pretty, like, are there big mountains in Sweden? I mean,
Yes.
Never thought about it before.
You were in the very south of Sweden. There is
yeah,
right. But in the other end, there is some pretty big mountains, and or they're not very big. Like they're the highest peak in Sweden is about 2,000 meters, but it's wild and it's remote, and you kind of have to take care of yourself when you're out there. So there is definitely like a pretty a real mountain culture in that sense, that people have been going out in these mountains and staying in huts and do like traverses and ski touring and flatland touring as well in wild places. But then there is, I mean, hundreds of ski hills and some real ski resorts. I mean, Åre, where I used to live for 20 years, it's I remember I made a comparison to Mammoth. I think they have 1.3 million skier days a year, and it's 50 lifts and 100 slopes and 42,000 guest beds. So it's like a big resort. People come from all over Europe to there.
I had no idea Åre had 50 lifts. Wow.
Yeah, so it's pretty big place, and there is other bigger places, but also like these smaller, cool, little bit more remote places further north that is a little bit more what I really like.
So you referenced Åkerskidor, which was the basically the powder magazine of Sweden, right? I mean,
yeah,
and it was based in Åre too, wasn't it?
Yeah. So for a long time it was, and I actually moved there. I was hired to work as associated editor and photo editor. So when I was like 22 or something, I got that job, and my boss at the time was John Crawford Curry. That is my boss again now, for Stella Equipment. So he taught me a ton of stuff about how you make a magazine and everything around that. The magazine was based there in Åre for probably like 25 years. And Åre is really like the epicenter of skiing in Sweden, and it's a lot of companies in the industry are based there, more so now than when I moved there in the end of 90s, and lots of photographers and filmmakers and pro skiers and industry people. So it's really, I mean, in the States, there is a lot of these type of places, Jackson, Truckee, Mammoth, I mean, many more centers like that. I would say Canada is maybe a little bit more like Sweden, that Whistler is that epicenter where most of the industry, I would say, as at least the industry people, like the media people, photographers, filmers, and journalists, and so on. Like Canada doesn't really have that many companies that are based within the country. I mean, other than the Terex and a couple of smaller ones, I can't really think of too many. I mean, a couple small ski brands, but Sweden actually have quite a few global brands.
It's astounding, actually, how many really good brands there are from Sweden. Like, there's,
for being such a small country, it's definitely a lot. So in Åre, Peak Performance was founded there. Stellar Equipment is primarily based there, also in Stockholm, and a number of other brands, not just outerwear. There is a ski factory called Åre Ski Factory, which is one of the most sustainable ski factories in the world. RMU, the Colorado-based company, is my dog decided to come up.
That's the famous. Is that your famous? Is that
the famous husky?
The famous husky?
Yeah, it's Connie. He's a sweet little guy. He's born in Sweden too. He immigrated together with me.
Yeah, your husky he's keen. he's keen.
Yeah, I like.
Well, I want to get to him, but I want to ask you, how did you go from Åre to Riksgränsen, or the other way around?
Yeah, no, actually, I grew up in a town called Växjö, which is not so far from Malmö, where you were, Justin. It's between Malmö and Stockholm, so in the south. So when I was 17, 18, I took the train sometimes like 3, 4, or 5 times a year up to Riksgränsen, because I started to go there, got to know some people. Like, it's a tiny place, and then eventually got a job there. So I worked in the cleaning department, as little as possible to be able to spend as much time as possible in the mountains. And I started to shoot there. I met a photographer called Lars Thulin, and he was kind enough to take me on. So I was hanging out with him, and for a bit I was his intern and helped him with kind of sorting slides and, like, you know, just hanging out. Like, he didn't really have to take on me there, but he was super kind to me and gave me a lot of knowledge, just passed on a lot of knowledge, and kind of taught me a bunch of things. I remember, for example, like I was curious, like, oh, how do you submit photos to Patagonia? Because he was working quite a bit with Patagonia, and he had multiple cover shots back then. And I obviously saw that, wow, this is super cool. And his work from the Arctic was really appealing to them. So, and then I remember he gave me the guidelines, and he told me, like, yeah, I would wait a little bit, you know, like, don't send anything before you feel like it's really good, because you only have one chance to impress these guys. So I waited 10 years before
Wow.
the photo, and then the first submission actually got a cover. And
That's amazing.
And then ever since I've submitted photos and worked with them on a bigger scale sometimes, and, you know, mostly just submitting some of my work. But yeah, it was a good advice, because I mean, now sitting on the other side of the table, like, if you get any submission from someone, you know this exactly, like, that first impression, I mean, it kind of lasts. So it was probably one of the best things he could ever teach me, because I took that with me for everything else too. Like, same when you approach a brand with an idea or whatever, like, there is no rush, right? Like, I mean, it's not like we're gonna stop skiing or stop biking or being in the outdoors. And these brands you want to work with, they're generally there the next year too, and if not, maybe it wasn't meant to be, right? So that advice.
That's good advice.
Really,
I wish somebody would have told me that a long time ago.
So,
Yeah, I wish somebody told you that too. But
Lars was also amazing. I remember, like, I was so keen, and I was there, like, trying to like we actually kind of formed sort of a working relationship. So because I was more of a writer back then. I went to school to learn how to write, and, like, there was a bit of photography within that. So, like, that sparked my interest, but I was more like a writer with the camera. So when Lars and I started to work together, like, I was the writer and he was the photographer. And I remember I still had my camera with me, and it was one time specifically, like, I was standing there, like, shooting the same thing, and he was, like, turning around. We were on a bike trip, and it's like, wasn't I the photographer? I was the photographer, right?
yeah, that's a great way to alienate a photographer, as I've learned many times.
Yes,
over the
I mean,
years.
he gave, you got some good advice, but not all was the best advice.
But, you know, and I was like, yeah, you know, like, I was so keen to photograph that too. But yeah,
As you elbow him out of the way, yeah, I guess you were. I don't know.
That's a nice spot. Good choice.
but he really, like, he was so gentle with me, sort of like some people would be like, hey, dude, you could do that if you think that you're better. But like, he really spent some time and, like, taught me, like, the ropes with all kinds of things. So, like, that was a couple of things like that really got me thinking too. And, like, and we kept working as a team where I was writing and he was photographing, and then eventually, like, I got a job at Editorial Magazine. So then, like, my photography kind of started to progress. Progress, and I had opportunities because I was kind of doing it the whole time. And instead, I could buy Lars's photos for the magazine, and we're still friends. I've been working with him throughout the years, but, like, that time that he was so generous with his time, and he was so cool with, like, passing on, like, knowledge that it's impossible. You can't go to any school to learn some of that stuff. And that, for me, that was like the most valuable time in my career. I still remember this time super well. And it was, without that, I've said that many times, I would probably never been here. So
I was just going to ask, did you set out to be, I mean, was this your plan, like when you were younger, like once you got addicted to skiing, did you just think I'm going to be in ski media, or did this just sort of evolve organically?
Yeah, no, like, it was definitely more of a something that I just came up. Like I actually went to in equivalent to high school when I was like 15, 16. Is that kind of high school age? I went to a school where it was more like a business school sort of or program, and then we went to the local newspaper for like a tour and like learning what that business is about. It was quite a bit of like practical stuff. So we were also like the work I had in the sports shop was through that, and like so. And then everybody knew that I was a sports freak, so we came to the sports department at the paper. It was a pretty big paper, and they were like, "Oh yeah, if there's someone who's interested in sports, like we're looking for people to help us out on the weekend, sort of, you know, like collecting results in like lower league soccer and hockey and all kinds of stuff." And everybody was like, "Oh yeah, you should," like they were pushing me to the front. It's like this guy. And then I actually applied and got a job, and then eventually that led to like a little bit more real writing, not just collecting these results. And then I went to the Saturday edition editor one day and was like, "Hey, I want to write about this photographer. He doesn't live here, but he's cool." And then they let me for some reason. So Lars was that guy. So I went to Riksgränsen to do this story for the newspaper, and they asked me to take a photo of him when he was working. So that was probably one of the first photos I got published. But even before that, I had my own little fan sign when I was like 11, 12, called Heavy, about
awesome.
punk rock and heavy metal. It was mainly like just looking at my favorite magazines in Sweden that wrote about this, and I was like, "Oh, I like this band," and you know, I listened to this music, and I was playing the drums, and then I contacted the record labels to get their bios and professional photos, and then I kind of, you know, put that in my own little band sign and did stories about some of the local bands. And so I started kind of like, I had some sort of drive.
Yeah, you've been doing this your whole life. Yeah, that's great.
So, yeah.
Did you make a decision to was it organic and you sort of drifted toward photography, or did you make a decision at some point where I'm going to really focus on the shooting? Or have you woven them together your whole career? Because I think of you primarily as a photographer, and that's how I know most of your work. Was there a crux moment where you said, I'm going to work on this?
This is quite interesting. Exactly what you say there. Like when I got that job at the magazine, like gawker-atters, like I worked there for 3 years at least, and I realized, because during that time I photographed Jon Olsson, Henrik Winstedt, and Robert Olsson, like some of the best skiers in Sweden. I met Candide Tovex and some of these other guys, and like some of these brands that had started to sponsor these guys, they wanted to buy my photos, and I was sitting on 2 shares. So I realized that, okay, my photos can speak a universal language, while my stories, they work in Sweden, and that's right. So that quite quickly I realized that if I want to do something with this and also follow my friends out in the world, because they start to get opportunities, and I was kind of sort of stuck at the magazine. We had like, I think 6 or 7 issues a year. So I couldn't go on all these trips, but I did travel with them quite a bit, and there was quite a few filmers coming to Sweden in the spring. So like there was a lot of cool things going on, sort of locally or in Riksgränsen and some events and so on. So that's why I actually quit the magazine too, because I realized that, okay, I can continue with this and just do the same thing sort of, and that will be like a sort of a national thing. But if I really want to give this a go and give it my all, I need to get out of the country and also photography was the tool for me to be able to do that. So I started to travel. Like, I quit. I was just 25, I guess. And people told me, "You're stupid. You have the best job. And, you know, what do you think you're going to do now? Like, how is this going to work?" And I was like, well, watch me now. No, but
You just email those people all the time? I would if I were you. I would have written that down. I'd just be emailing them every single time I got a cover shot.
How do you like me now?
Or just send them a copy.
yeah.
Did you have contracts with any brands, or did you?
No,
Because
like,
that's a huge leap, man.
When I decided, I had nothing. And then as soon as I quit or made that public, sort of, or like said that to anyone, my friend Niklas Bornling, who was the marketing director for Salomon in Sweden at the time, and then eventually became the brand director for Salomon International, and then had the same role at Black Diamond. He called me like, "Hey, I have a job for you." So Salomon had just started with some sort of blog or some like an online thing where they wanted to produce content about their team riders, and they want monthly updates. And I mean, I was useless with internet, and like, this is almost before we had email addresses. Like, it was 1,000 years before social media. So anyways, I got that contract, and there was some shoots involved, and eventually this led to a more established relationship with Salomon internationally that became one of my, probably my biggest clients for about 20 years, because he got promoted to there. So like, but that was like just by coincidence, right? Like, I really had nothing when I started, but I just had this belief that, okay, I need to do something here. And I knew that, I think I had my first photo published in powder just before this, or like a couple shots, but like Reddick had given me a bone, sort of, and
David
also,
Reddick, photo editor at Powder. What year was this, Mattias? This is the 90s, or?
Actually, I definitely had more than one photo published in powder before I quit, because the first one was in '97. I remember I was actually walking home, reading powder as I walked up the hill. I didn't have a car at the time, so I walked from the office and I just taken out the mail. The new powder was in there, and it was a November issue in '97.
You do remember that? That's awesome.
Tiny photo from it that I did when I was on Simon Forker, and it was my friend Eric Mossfeld. He was one of the best telemark skiers at the time in the Free Radicals crew, and it was tiny, and I was so stoked. I remember I was yelling on the street, and it was probably someone's like, "Who's that weirdo?"
That's awesome.
Probably drunk.
Well, I can tell you, I was still there then, and I can tell you that no bones were thrown. So whatever the choice was, you earned it.
Yeah, I felt that it was a bone, because I was like, yes. And that was kind of like the pin, like, you know, when you start to get published in magazines like Powder, and then eventually like some of the European magazines I'd published before, and like, for me it was like, okay, if my stuff works on this level, then I should give this a chance at least. Because I was like, I kind of knew how the magazine work was done, and it was like, it was fun, but it was also like, it kind of held me back a bit, because I had to be there the whole time, and it wasn't boring, but I was too young to be in that role. I was like 22 or something, and I was the editor-in-chief for a pretty established and sort of important magazine. So there was another guy that I felt like, hey, he's a much better fit for this, because he had family and he didn't want to travel all the time, and he had a more experience, sort of. So like, I felt like I was kind of thrown into that role a little bit too early. Like, if this was 5-10 years later, I would probably like, oh, this is awesome. But for me, it was like, I hadn't done that world tour yet. Like, and I'm really glad I took that chance, because we kind of helped each other there around that time. Like, these riders that I mentioned before, like, some of them became some of the best and most well-known free skiers in the world, and this was a really progressive time in skiing. It was like right after Poor Boys had done their first film. The Free Radicals crew that I hanged out with had also released their first film, and these films made skiing cool again. So it was like really in an upswing. Snowboarding had been cool for a while, and really helped skiing come back, and it was like, it was a pretty good time to kind of give this a go, because there was tons of events, tons of sponsorship thrown around. Anyone who wanted to give it a go and had some sort of talent got a pretty good contract. So like, and like tons of magazines, and everybody wanted to kind of be associated with these riders. So there was a lot of photos bought and lots of contracts, and it was a fairly easy time to kind of get into it if you were keen and if you kind of knew how to play that game. Today,
can we go back?
Yeah, I was just thinking that too.
Yeah. And I mean easy. Not, I wouldn't say easy, because one thing is for sure that, like, I took some decisions that I think was really crucial. Like if I would stay in Sweden or Europe, like quite a few of my colleagues, and not travel to North America, and not go to the X Games and like all like US Open, and like kind of made the connections, I realized I have to go to North America. That's where the industry is the biggest, and that's where like the drive is coming from here. This is like, I need to be on that scene, on that market, and that also led to like relationships I still have. Like, I mean, I met Leslie Anthony early on. Like, I went to Whistler in like 2000, and we became instant friends, and we still work together all the time. We're in almost daily contact, and we've been traveling the world together, working on assignment for all kinds of magazines and brands, and you know, like that wouldn't have happened if I didn't go there. And same with, I went, like, visited at Powder and Bike and many of the other magazines, and I worked quite a bit with Oakley back then, and became friends with Greg Stokes and a lot of the people there, and took the time to go there. And same with Patagonia. I remember one year in the fall, like I wanted to do a trip in the fall, just because it was kind of like a good opportunity and like sort of off season. And I went for like a little visit at the Patagonia office, and I went to see people at Oakley and Powder and Poor Boys and all kinds of places in California. And I mean, the reason why I became established and friends with all these people was not just because my photos. It was maybe more that I actually realized that the networking and like these friendships, they were equally as important. And I think to a certain extent, like, there's so many good photographers in Scandinavia, and there's some that is way better photographers than me now and back then, that never really understood the value of doing these type of trips, or like how to kind of work the market. So it's one thing to take good shots, another thing to be a good photographer and business person, which is basically what it comes down to. So
yeah, amen to that. I am forever shocked at how people will, whether it's a PR person trying to get us to cover gear or a location, or a writer or a photographer who will toss off these pitches where they clearly have not thought about what our needs are. And, you know, all things being equal, there are a lot of really talented people out there, and you're going to work with the people that understand what you're trying to do. And because you can trust them, because then it becomes more like a partnership, right? As opposed to just like a transactional thing. So we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more to Mattias about his approach to photography. He claims there's better photographers, but I mean, have you seen his work? So we're going to talk about that approach, and also about his creative expression through his relationship with Stellar Equipment and what he's doing with their very cool publication, Interstellar. So stick around. We will be right back. You love adventure, we love adventure, and that is why we created Adventure Journal in print. It is the gift that we've made for ourselves and for our friends, and hopefully for you, that is analog, that gets away from screens, that gives you some of the most interesting, deepest, and thoughtful stories from some of the best writers and photographers working in the outdoor space. We do 4 a year. You get free shipping and a deep discount. It's $60 to have this absolutely beautiful, no batteries necessary celebration of adventure in your mailbox. Get it at adventure-journal.com. I am drinking, it's gotten cold now because we're halfway through the show. I am drinking Long Weekend Coffee. We launched Long Weekend Coffee earlier this year to bring you and us blends that are not fussy, that will take any kind of brew method that we like, whether it's at home, in a cabin, on the tailgate of a truck, doesn't matter. We have 4 blends. We have dark, medium, espresso roast, and a decaf. I think they're pretty amazing. I guarantee you will like them. Check us out at longweekend.coffee. Yeah, Justin was Googling you and found there's like some Mattias Fredriksson who was in prison, some who's a big cross-country star.
Yeah, there's some. Do you know the Mattias Fredriksson who's like a cross-country gold medalist? Like huge.
Oh yeah, I've been invited to really cool parties with.
I'll bet you have. He was busted for I forget what, but he was like in prison for a little bit or something.
Oh really? But he was also he's now married with the former Miss Sweden. And when I was young and single, I got a invitation like in the mail to go to a really cool party with her, and I was like, I would love to do that.
Damn it! I wish we were recording that. That's great. That's fantastic. Okay, good, because that's really good.
So, Mattias, one thing that I've noticed is that, and one thing that I really admire about you is you're drawn to. I haven't been to either one, but what appears to be smaller, more communal, more soulful places. That's my sense of Riksgränsen. And then a few years ago, tell us the year, please, but you moved from Sweden to BC. So tell us about why you did that and where you went and how it is similar to Riksgränsen.
Yeah, so my partner, Elle, who is originally from New Zealand, and then her family moved to BC. We met in Sweden, and she was missing BC, and I'd always wanted to move there. So we decided to move from Åre to BC. First, we lived in Squamish for a year, and then she got a job up here in Terrace, and we wanted to move somewhere with, like, less busy and a mountain town. So Terrace became an amazing opportunity for us, and that's now 6 years ago. And I had been up here for work long ago, both here and in Smithers, which is a couple hours away. So I knew that, okay, there is amazing mountains, and then we figured out that, oh wow, there is good trails, and it was like a lot of stuff here that was kind of in our liking. And I hadn't even been to Shames, which is our local little ski hill, when I was here the first time. And when winter came around, we moved in the summer, and then when the winter came, we were pretty much shocked how cool of a place that is, because it's just a couple of lifts, but the backcountry is endless, and it's such a perfect place for ski touring. And the ski hill is a co-op. It's half an hour from town, and very, very, like, what do you say, ma and pa type place. It's like a little lodge, a couple old lifts, and very, very grassrooty. And I grew up also like out in a fairly small village with a similar approach to skiing, like small little ski hills, rope tows, very grassrooty, right? Like I never really, I mean, I lived in Åre for 20 years, and Åre is a fairly big resort, but it still like has a lot of these little places around, and it is an old farming community there. So like, I guess it has a little bit of that feel to it as well. And like throughout the years when I've been traveling, I mean, if I would name a couple of favorites like Grav, and so on, like these tiny resorts like Arolla in Switzerland and Le Maréchal, like most of them have like a couple lifts and like opportunities if you start venturing off, and I assume that it's just something that fits me both as a skier, but also when you're a photographer, when you go on trips to produce a story or photo shoot, like it really, like you don't really fit in on these super busy ski areas, right? So like we rather go to like small places. I guess that it has become pretty natural over the years.
Well, the big places, it's the commercialism of it, the chasing the buck and the profit is always in your face. And a place like Shames or, you know, these other places that it's not. It's there because people are passionate. And this is one of the things that's flipped over the last, you know, 20, 30 years is it's a hard business, but it's a big business now. And those mom and pop places are so fewer of them than there were. And it becomes, it's rare to find one, especially one that has access to the kind of terrain that you have access to, because you're pretty far up there. You know, you're not just north of Whistler. You're quite a ways up.
Yeah, it's if you drive, it's like at least 15, 16 hours north of Whistler. So it's way up there.
Wow, that is a long haul.
Even if like on a map, like when we lived in Åre in Sweden, we were way further north. It's more like that's kind of Anchorage, Alaska. So we're much more south than that. But it's more remote because it's not that much around. But even if there is some other towns around here, so like it's not like we're in the middle of nowhere, but it kind of feels like that because it's definitely quite a drive to get here, which means we don't get the big crowds, and it's very
that makes sense.
Is there a big backcountry scene there, or not scene? But I mean, a group. I mean, it's.
Oh, it's definitely. I mean, Terrace is a town of like 12, 15,000 people, so there is, and it's more and more serious backcountry skiers here, and people come here sometimes, you know, it's a little bit of tourism happening, but there is no lineups, and it's a very friendly atmosphere and so on. So, and we get a lot of snow. So,
how much snow do you get?
I mean, annually it's usually like about 12 meters of snow. So,
oh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Is it pretty consistent, or is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
wow.
definitely.
What's the snowpack like? What's the stability like generally? Is it?
This is the coast range, so
okay.
We have amazing snowpack, and I would say that it's the storms usually come in pretty wet, and then they get a little colder in the tail end. Now it's like a El Niño year here, so it's not as consistent as normally, but the early season was really great, and I'm sure it's going to pick up again here soon.
So you have often taken breaks to get away from skiing and to give yourself a little bit of perspective, not to shoot maybe as intensively. But lately, you've gotten into something new with Interstellar, a magazine that is an online magazine from Stellar Equipment, which I knew y'all were working on it. And of course, I didn't know what to expect. And then I saw it and I was really blown away. It's beautiful. It has depth. It has soul. It has the voices in there, people who are just really talented and interesting, and some old friends. So what's the story? Tell us about this.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It's we really believe in unique content, and previously the social media channels we had, they were really shallow. Like there was not much to it. So there was my boss John Crawford Curry told me that okay, we want to start telling stories in a different way. And like I've been working with Stellar since the beginning, so we had been on a bunch of trips and we had a lot of content laying there, but I guess that the pace was pretty fast. The company was growing quickly, and it was a little bit hard to like create time to kind of do something with this content, and it takes time also to kind of build up like a YouTube channel and so on. So like what we knew, and like what John comes from as well is magazine background, and him and I work together at Gawker-atters Magazine, as we spoke about before. So we kind of figured like, okay, if there is something we know, it's to work on that style of content. And then the other stuff will kind of have to come after, sort of. But we also realized we need to put like a film component to it. So like what Interstellar is doing differently to most other media houses out there, I guess, in this space, is that we can combine film with photography and stories. So we try to make it a little bit more as in a way like a multimedia platform, I guess. We can combine, some of the stories have both film and photography combined in the stories, and it's getting more into that. And now we also work with an agency that helps us out with some of the social media stuff, because we know the classic stuff, we can create it, but it's hard to kind of break through, and like, how do you kind of crack the code these days? So and since we are a company that lives online, it's direct to consumers, that's the sales model. So like, even if we love print, we are online, so we need to kind of work with the tools that's there. So I assume that you can describe it as like a very sort of classic traditional style of creating the content, but then we try to present it in a quite new way, I assume.
So can you give me an example? Give us an example, like one particular story that you think really expresses that.
Yeah, I mean, when we do, we don't talk much about our own, nothing about our own products, but we do highlight some of our ambassadors. And so when we do a story about an ambassador, and we have both film clips and still photography and a written story, we just mix that up, right? But it's not like we just have some sort of quick write up about these person. We assign the work to a real journalist and really like spend time on this, and sometimes send a photographer somewhere or a filmer, and we really like spend time on the content. Interstellar is also a way for us to, when we do our trips that we've been doing all the time, we produce quite a bit of content. Like, we actually have a little bit more of a purpose when we go somewhere, because we produce a couple of stories for Interstellar, we shoot a campaign, we maybe make a film that we submit to a film festival, and it has become a little bit more like we actually have an in-house media house,
production company.
Yeah. Like,
dang, it sounds. I tell you, dude. I mean, that it sounds like a dream. And you know, I was thinking. This is something that's been on my mind for many years, which is that, especially when you look at Patagonia, you know, and you look at the depth of cultural resonance that the Patagonia catalogs have had for so many decades, and as a media company, and you reference Powder, and obviously we're a media company. I mean, our product is the media, and our margins are small, and it's always, you know, it's a push for profitability, as you know, from Gawker-atters. But I mean, now you've got this patron, which is Stellar, which, you know, has much bigger margins than a magazine, which enables you then to, you know, when you have somebody like John who has that vision for telling stories in a different way, you basically have more resources than a typical media company. You know, it's like what Red Bull is doing, you know, to a much larger degree. And man, what a great place for you guys to be able to have resources to go and have multi-channel paths to tell those stories. It's, you know, I mean, I'm jealous. It's amazing. You guys are in a great spot.
Well, and the stories are diverse too. They're not just, I mean, if for anyone who hasn't checked it out, it's not just skiing. I mean, that's the majority of it. But I mean, you guys have stories about mountain biking.
It's mountain culture. That's
yeah,
what
and
it
it's
is.
not like slash stuff either. I mean, I really like the one about like skiing in between the trees, where you actually get, you know, the writer gets into like how bark changes in the wintertime and how snow affects trees in the wintertime. I mean, it's pretty cool stuff. It's not like, if you're expecting something that's just big slashing turns and like travel stories, it's not that. It's much more thoughtful and nuanced. It's the content's great. The blend is really good.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thanks. It's interesting you bring up something like that, because sometimes I think that, especially Leslie Anthony and I, that he's one of our contributing editors, and Leslie and I, perhaps over the years, have felt a little bit too that it's not always so easy these days. The magazines that's still around are pretty picky with the content, and sometimes it's these corporations with brands that doesn't allow editors to actually even take on certain ideas that we bring forward. So like now we can use our experience and our knowledge within the industry, and also like our archive. Sort of we don't go and do news stories all the time. We maybe kind of see what do we have here, and then we shake it around a bit and create stories that, like, we can take pieces here and there, and something is a little bit recycled, done in a different way, different photography, and it hits a pretty big audience that very few people have seen exactly these stories in a printed magazine before, and we always make sure we update it and so on. But then we also do specifically new things for this. And since we're still actively working with magazines around the world, we go on new trips and we do variants for Interstellar, and we have specific formats and departments there. So we hope also that eventually it will be like our department, the classics, for example, is really like pretty incredible guides for anyone who's going to go to like places like Courmayeur or St. Anton or Aspen, that you could go and check these out, and you know how to ski the mountain, where to eat, where to have your après-ski beer, and how to travel there and stuff like that. Like, there is not many magazines that give you that information. You can find it all online, but you want to do that research, right? Like, we have done that research. So we hope that some of our departments will be a little bit the stable that people like advise their friends, like, hey, go and check out Interstellar. You can find this stuff there. And we celebrate a bunch of other brands. Like in our department industry report, we have stories about specifically small brands, innovative brands. We want to lift them up and talk about their stories. So it's cool to have that opportunity, and Stellar as a company is really cool that they don't just look at what they do themselves. Like, I have very free hands to create pretty much whatever I want that kind of resonates with our ethos, and
that's rare for a company to do that, and that speaks to the faith that Stellar has in in its customers and potential customers, and it's a, I guess, sort of an open-hearted approach, and we've talked about that a lot with AJ, and even sort of with our coffee brand as we talking about other coffee companies. I mean, I think that's how the world really is reflected, but too often magazines seem to exist within this these very narrow parameters of their own world, or brand content, if you want to call it that. And I think that the brands have been super successful from a storytelling standpoint, are the ones that are unafraid to talk about other folks and what they're doing.
And obviously one reason why we could have this very sort of inclusive or humble approach is also, we can talk about these small brands, because we're not like in this situation where many magazines these days are maybe a little bit afraid of like lifting up one company, because then the next 5 that have placed ads that year want to like, why didn't you do a story about us? And I do think that we are in a luxury position where we don't have any ads, right? Like we can do whatever we want, and we don't answer to anyone, and we just want to create a cool blend of content that we think that our readership will enjoy. And if they like what we do, maybe they want to go and check out the products, maybe not, but that's like, eventually this is the best way of building the brand.
So what are some of those little brands that you featured? I'm curious to know. I know I saw one, there was a boot, really cool winter waterproof
Yeah,
boot
that was
brand. It was,
Fubuki Boots, which is a Swedish company that do these boots that you see in all kinds of situations. Cody Townsend and his crew, they brought them to Baffin Island, and yeah, they're becoming really popular. It's two young guys from Sweden that started this. They found them in Japan, packaged them a little differently and a little different design, and became a hit. And Cast Touring was another company that we have highlighted there that creates these hybrid bindings where you could change the toe piece so you can tour up, but then you have like a more solid binding coming down. That's very popular amongst really strong skiers that want to go far but also want to be not just skiing a normal tech binding coming down. Furberg Snowboards, which is a Swedish Norwegian snowboard company that is one of the leading companies in the splitboard scene. What else have we highlighted? I actually just finished a story about 1000 Skis, that a Swedish ski brand from the founders of the collective The Bunch, that is a film and ski collective. They started their own ski brand. And then, yeah, we have a bunch of stores there. We did one piece about Chromag bikes from Whistler.
I like that story a lot. Their bikes look great.
Yeah, they're a super cool little company. And so you hear it's like small companies, a little different, and innovative brands, right? So, yeah. And quite we have another Swedish brand that we will highlight here in a couple of days when we come out with a new update. And it's Spectrum Sports, that are one of the most sustainable eyewear companies that work with biodegradable material up to more than 60% in their products, for example. And
are you getting to the point where brands are pitching you, or are you just seeing this stuff online and or word of mouth, or you know people who have it? How do you find them?
Surprisingly, very few brands contact us. This is brands that we know of and our contributor. We have a great group of contributors. Matthew Tufts is another one of our contributing editors, who is an AJ.
He's written for us.
Yeah. So sometimes Matt or Leslie or myself or other people around. John helps us out. He's a busy man. He's now our CEO as well, but he comes with ideas as well. And I work tight with our art director Sindre, who sits back in Sweden. And then I have a copy editor in Smithers, Amy, who helps me out with a lot of that work. So we're like a little group, and we definitely elaborate on ideas and stuff, but and I get pitches here and there, but yeah, I hope as we get more recognized that even brands contact us directly for collaborations or stories. So,
well, as we wind this down, I wanted to ask you about by the numbers. So, do you have any idea how many countries you've skied in?
Oh, how many countries? No, but I know I've been to more than 200 ski destinations.
Okay.
And I've skied on all continents.
That's cool.
All right. And how many covers have you had?
528.
To the number? You know that off the top of your head?
Now, when
Did you have to get a new tattoo with every one? Just another line?
Because Stephen and I talked about this when I had the AJ cover here.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's why I kind of knew it a little bit more specifically, because the
was the AJ cover. So this is AJ 31. The current was that 528, or have you had one since?
527, I think, and then I had one after that.
Dude, money, man.
But I mean, not that it matters, but it's fun. Like it is, as someone said, it's the most important picture of each magazine, for the most part, right? I mean, that's. You sort of like either if you sell it on a newsstand, or it's still gonna sort of sell the magazine.
Well, yeah, I mean, unless there's a picture of the editor inside, that would be the most important.
But I mean, it's super fun. It's it used to be little different maybe when there was more magazines. Like you can actually like, there was photographers that was more or less just shooting all winter and then submitting the photos to magazines and brands, hoping to get published, and you can actually make a pretty decent living. I mean, personally, these days, like getting published in magazines and like randomly, sort of like just a random shot that you don't have like a story attached to. I mean, it's more fun that it just sort of to still be in the game, if I put it that way. I have another job, but I love the whole print side, and it's super fun, but it's a quite small percentage of my work these days and my income, and unfortunately I don't think that there is that many photographers that could kind of rely on this anymore. Like, I mean, the way it's been going with the industry, even if there is a lot of magazines left, it's like it's a totally different thing these days, right? So
yeah, at one point I remember I was kind of curious how much so the top photographer by volume for Powder back in the day was Scott Markowitz, and I ran the numbers to see how much Scott was making from us, because it seemed like, I mean, every issue we had, I mean, he was a machine shooting, and I think the most that we ever paid him, and we had 7 issues, and I think the most that we paid him in a winter was maybe $7,000, which is, you're not going to live on $7,000. I mean, it was shocking to me how little that actually was. And of course, the media market has completely changed. I mean, a big contributor to AJ might make that much over the course of 4 issues, but it's a hard business no matter what side you're on, and you have to be really passionate about it. And I mean, the thing about 528 covers is, that's nice, but it also speaks to something within your photography, and not just how hard you work in your relationships, but something that's in your photography, because that is the most important page. And, coming back to the idea of first impressions, we have people who've subscribed to AJ from the very first issue, but we also have people who've never seen it. And so each time that we sit down to pick a cover, we're thinking, about those people who've never seen it and what it says. So I don't know. To me, that speaks tremendously about you and your work, and also your vision of photography.
It's also super influential, because it's like, I'm sure ski magazines are the same, but with surf magazines, I worked at Surfer magazine for years. That's my background, but we identify the issue by the cover. So, if I think back to particular issues that I loved, we think about the cover, and that's how we talk about it. Oh, that Alaska issue with that, shot that so-and-so took, like, I don't even remember seeing the rest of the issue, but I remember that cover, and I remember thinking that I loved that issue. And it was like, that was as we get further and further from monthly magazines, the cover shots are what I'm going to remember more than anything else.
I think this is going to be actually giving magazines another, almost like a revitalize it now, because since I can see a little bit of a return in like the style of magazines that you guys are doing, and Mountain Gazette and others that are a little bit more collector's issues, right? And I mean, if I look here on my coffee table, like I have books and I have magazines that I like to save, like you, and I can see how these theme issues and a little different style, different approach. Like most magazines I see these days, they definitely look a little bit more clean, a little bit more like books, rather than like, if I go back 10 years, there was big headlines and a lot of text on top, because you kind of had to sell the magazine differently, because it was primarily for newsstands. So I think maybe there will be more. I personally sell more from my archive shots that are older, because there is a certain demand for photos, like theme photos, or like yandere photos, or something that isn't really, like, it doesn't matter if it's shot the last season. And that's how I said this to an editor recently, because they were like, oh, but this photo we published, it's like 3 years old. Like, yeah, so what? Like, I'm not producing.
that troubled them?
Yeah, like I told them, like, I don't produce like sort of fast food. Like I like to look at my work more like classic music, in the sense of not classic music, but music that was classic rock. Like we still listen to Rolling Stones or the Beatles, right? Like it's the same songs we listened to 15, 20, 30 years ago. Like photography that is timeless, in my opinion, has the same look. But many times the outdoor space, for some reason, especially skiing and snowboarding, for some reason, it needs to be new all the time. Like, and I mean, personally, I know that I will not go back to certain places and shoot deeper POW shots or necessarily better photos than I did some other trip 10 years ago. But what I like to do is to come back to a place, and maybe I tell a story with the backflash to when I first came here in 2006, as opposed to now. Like, this place have changed this and this way, and here's photos from this first trip, and this is now. Like, that's how I like to tell stories within skiing and mountain biking these days, because I, with my background and the sort of my history or like knowledge about the place and how it's changed and how I can compare it to Europe and North America or Scandinavia, like I feel like that gives the readers of this story a lot more, and then I can actually show that in the visuals as well, if that makes sense.
Well, we are going to wrap it up. We have been talking to Mattias Fredriksson. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for your work. It's amazing. We'll have all of the key links in the show notes. Thank you for giving us your time to listen. Your time is your most important thing. I hope you spend it well. You can, and please do, follow, like, review, all the usual things. And if you want to see more about Adventure Journal and what we do in print, go to adventure-journal.com. Adios.